She walked into Irwin County High School every single morning with a smile that could light up the darkest hallway. Her name was Tara Grinstead, and she was the kind of teacher who made you believe in yourself when nobody else would. The kind of woman who stayed after class to help struggling students, who bought supplies with her own money, who remembered your birthday and your dreams. And on October 22nd, 2005, she vanished from the face of the earth without a trace. For 11 agonizing years, her disappearance haunted a small Georgia town, whispered about in diners and churches, debated at family dinners and late-night gatherings. Everyone had a theory. Everyone had a suspect in mind. But nobody, not a single soul in that tight-knit community, could have predicted the truth. Because when the arrest finally came in 2017, it didn't just shock the community. It shattered everything they thought they knew about the people they trusted, the students they raised, and the secrets that had been hiding in plain sight all along. This is the story of Tara Grinstead. This is the story of how silence became complicity, how loyalty became a prison, and how justice waited in the shadows for over a decade. And I need you to stay with me until the very end, because what happened in this case will change the way you look at everyone around you. If you've ever trusted someone who didn't deserve it, if you've ever wondered what dark secrets the people closest to you might be hiding, then this story was made for you. Before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to this channel and share this video, because stories like this one need to be told. They need to be heard. And someone you know needs to see this today. Let me take you back to Ocilla, Georgia. Population just over 3,000 souls. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where Friday night football is religion, and where teachers aren't just educators, they're pillars of the community. Tara Faye Grinstead was born on November 14, 1974, and from the moment she could walk, she was destined to shine. Growing up in nearby Hawkinsville, she was the girl who won beauty pageants and academic awards, the girl who could charm a room while simultaneously acing every test put in front of her. She wasn't just beautiful on the outside. She radiated warmth from within. After graduating from Fort Valley State University with a degree in education, Tara found her calling. She became a history teacher at Irwin County High School, and almost immediately, she became everyone's favorite. Students flocked to her classroom not just for the lessons, but for the feeling of being seen. She had this gift, you see. She could look at a struggling teenager and make them feel like they mattered, like their potential was limitless, like someone actually believed in them. But Tara's influence extended far beyond the classroom walls. She was passionate about pageantry, about helping young women develop confidence and poise. She coached contestants for the Miss Sweet Potato pageant, transforming nervous girls into poised young women who walked across stages with their heads held high. She volunteered for countless community events, organized fundraisers, and never missed a chance to give back to the town that had embraced her. At 30 years old, Tara had everything going for her. She owned a charming pecan orchard farmhouse on West Park Street. She had close friends, devoted students, and a community that adored her. She was dating, exploring relationships, living her life with the kind of optimism that made people gravitate toward her energy. Everyone expected great things from Tara Grinstead. A family of her own, perhaps. A long career shaping young minds. A life filled with the love she so freely gave to others. Nobody expected her to disappear. The weekend of October 22, 2005, started like any other. Saturday night brought a celebration, a local barbecue and party that Tara attended with friends. She laughed. She danced. She was her usual vibrant self, lighting up every conversation, making everyone around her feel special. Witnesses would later recall that she seemed happy, relaxed, completely at ease. There was no sign of trouble, no indication that anything was wrong. She left the party sometime after midnight, heading home to her farmhouse on West Park Street. And then, silence. Monday morning arrived, and Tara didn't show up for school. Her students sat waiting in their desks, watching the clock, expecting their beloved teacher to walk through the door at any moment. But the door remained closed. The desk remained empty. By mid-morning, concern had spread through the halls like wildfire. This wasn't like Miss Grinstead. She never missed class. She never failed to call in. Something was wrong. When investigators arrived at her home, they found a scene that would haunt them for years. Tara's car was parked in the driveway. Her purse, her keys, her cell phone, all sitting inside the house. Her beloved cat was still there, waiting for an owner who would never return. The bed appeared to have been slept in. A lamp in the bedroom had been knocked over. Outside, near the front yard, investigators discovered a single latex glove lying in the grass. But there was no Tara, no note, no explanation, no trail to follow. The investigation kicked into high gear almost immediately. Irwin County Sheriff's deputies were joined by Georgia Bureau of Investigation agents, FBI specialists, and volunteers from across the region. They searched the pecan orchards surrounding her home. They drained ponds. They walked through forests with cadaver dogs, hoping to find something, anything, that would explain what happened to the beloved teacher. Flyers went up in every storefront. Her face appeared on news broadcasts across Georgia. Tips poured in by the hundreds, each one offering a new possibility, a new direction to explore. But every lead went cold. Every tip proved false. Every search came up empty. The community of Ocilla transformed overnight. The town that had always felt safe suddenly felt vulnerable. Parents who never locked their doors started installing deadbolts. Women who used to walk alone at night now traveled in groups. Everyone looked at their neighbors differently, wondering who among them might know something, who might have done something. And the theories began to multiply. Some believed Tara had been kidnapped by a stranger, taken by someone passing through town who spotted a woman living alone. Others suspected a former boyfriend, pointing to relationships that had ended badly or lovers who seemed a little too attached. There were whispers about local figures, prominent citizens whose names circulated in hushed conversations but never quite made it into official statements. Some even wondered if Tara had simply run away, started a new life somewhere far from Ocilla. But those who knew her dismissed that possibility immediately. Tara Grinstead loved her life. She loved her students. She loved her community. She would never abandon everything she'd built. Week after week, month after month, the investigation continued. But progress remained elusive. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation followed leads across state lines. They interviewed hundreds of witnesses, administered polygraph tests to persons of interest, and analyzed every piece of evidence found at the scene. But without a body, without a witness, without a confession, the case remained frozen in time. And Tara's loved ones were left in an impossible limbo, unable to move forward, unable to find closure, unable to accept that the woman they loved was truly gone. The first anniversary of Tara's disappearance passed without answers. Then the second, then the fifth. The town of Ocilla learned to live with the mystery, but they never forgot. Her students graduated and moved away, but they carried her memory with them. They named scholarships in her honor. They held candlelight vigils every October. They refused to let her story fade into obscurity, even as the years accumulated like dust on a forgotten shelf. For Tara's family, the pain never subsided. Her sister, Anita Gaddis, became the public face of the search for justice. She appeared on television programs, spoke at community events, and worked tirelessly to keep the case in the public eye. She begged for information. She pleaded for closure. She promised that anyone who came forward with information would be helping to heal a wound that had been festering for far too long. But the secrets remained buried. What nobody knew, what nobody could have possibly imagined, was that the truth wasn't hidden far away at all. It was right there in Ocilla, walking among them every single day. The person responsible for Tara's disappearance wasn't a stranger passing through town. He was one of their own, a young man they had watched grow up, a student who had sat in their classrooms, played on their football fields, and been welcomed into their homes. His name was Ryan Alexander Duke, and in 2005, he was just 18 years old. Ryan Duke came from a family that had deep roots in Irwin County. His father was a respected figure in the community, a man who worked hard and raised his children with traditional values. Ryan had been a student at Irwin County High School, just like so many other young people in Ocilla. He wasn't a troublemaker. He wasn't a criminal. He was just a kid trying to figure out his place in the world, struggling with demons that nobody quite understood. What those demons were, what drove him to the terrible act that would define his life, would only become clear years later. But on that October night in 2005, something inside Ryan Duke snapped. According to what would eventually emerge from the investigation, Ryan went to Tara's house in the early morning hours of October 23, 2005. His initial intention, prosecutors would later argue, was simply to burglarize the home, to steal whatever he could find to feed a growing addiction to drugs and alcohol. He believed the house was empty. He expected to get in and out without anyone knowing. But Tara was home. What happened next would haunt Ryan Duke for the rest of his life. It would haunt his family, his friends, and everyone who thought they knew him. In the darkness of that farmhouse bedroom, Ryan Duke allegedly killed Tara Grinstead. Whether it was intentional or accidental, whether he planned it or panicked, the result was the same. A beloved teacher lay dead at the hands of a young man who should have been planning his future, not ending someone else's. But Ryan Duke didn't act alone in what followed. Enter Bo Dukes. Same last name, no relation, but connected through a friendship that would become the darkest bond imaginable. Bo Dukes was also from Irwin County, a young man with a charismatic personality and a troubled streak. He was the kind of person who seemed to attract attention wherever he went, for better or for worse. And when Ryan Duke showed up that night, desperate and terrified, Bo Dukes made a choice that would make him complicit in one of Georgia's most infamous crimes. Together, according to prosecutors, the two young men disposed of Tara Grinstead's body. They drove to a remote property in Ben Hill County, a pecan orchard owned by Bo Duke's family. And there, in the darkness of rural Georgia, they burned her remains. They burned away the evidence. They burned away the possibility of a proper burial, of a funeral, of closure for a grieving family. And then they walked away. For 11 years, Ryan Duke and Bo Dukes kept their secret. They lived their lives while an entire community searched for answers. They attended community events while Tara's family held vigils. They built careers and relationships while investigators chased dead ends and false leads. They watched as reward money accumulated, as television programs featured the case, as psychics and amateur detectives offered theories that never came close to the truth. The weight of that secret must have been crushing. Or perhaps it wasn't. Perhaps the human capacity for compartmentalization, for denial, for self-preservation, is even more powerful than we imagine. Either way, the silence held, year after year after year. But secrets have a way of clawing their way to the surface. And eventually, someone talked. The breakthrough came in early 2017, more than 11 years after Tara's disappearance. A confidential informant approached the Georgia Bureau of Investigation with information that would finally crack the case wide open. This informant, whose identity has been protected, had knowledge of what really happened that night in October 2005. They knew about Ryan Duke. They knew about Bo Dukes. And they knew where Tara's remains had been taken. On February 23, 2017, Ryan Alexander Duke was arrested and charged with murder, aggravated assault, burglary, and concealing the death of another. When his mugshot appeared on television screens across Georgia, the community of Ocilla reacted with utter disbelief. This was Ryan Duke, the quiet kid they remembered from high school, the son of a respectable family, the young man who had been living among them all these years. Bo Dukes was arrested shortly afterward, charged as an accessory after the fact for his role in concealing the crime and disposing of Tara's body. Additional charges would follow, painting a picture of a man whose involvement went beyond simply helping a friend in a desperate moment. The arrests sent shockwaves through Irwin County and beyond. For years, the community had speculated about who might be responsible. They had pointed fingers at outsiders, at ex-boyfriends, at shadowy figures from Tara's past. They had never imagined that the killer was one of their own children, a young man who had grown up in their midst, who had been shaped by their schools and their churches and their values. How do you process that kind of betrayal? How do you reconcile the image of a troubled but familiar teenager with the reality of a killer who walked among you for more than a decade? How do you look at your own children, your own students, your own neighbors, and not wonder what secrets they might be hiding? These questions would plague Ocilla for years to come. But first, there was justice to pursue. The legal proceedings that followed the arrests of Ryan Duke and Bo Dukes were as complicated as the case itself. Prosecutors faced significant challenges. More than 11 years had passed since the crime. Physical evidence had deteriorated or been destroyed. Memories had faded. And the two men at the center of the case offered conflicting accounts of what actually happened that night. Ryan Duke, through his attorneys, admitted to being present when Tara died. But he claimed that the actual killing had been committed by Bo Dukes, that he was merely a frightened witness who became entangled in a nightmare not of his making. Bo Dukes, meanwhile, denied killing Tara but acknowledged his role in disposing of her remains. Each man pointed at the other. Each man tried to minimize his own culpability. For Tara's family, this finger-pointing was almost unbearable. After 11 years of waiting for answers, they were now forced to watch as two men blamed each other for the death of their beloved daughter, sister, and aunt. The truth, it seemed, might remain forever elusive, lost somewhere in the contradictions and self-serving statements of two people with every reason to lie. But prosecutors pressed forward. Bo Dukes was the first to face trial. In March 2019, he was convicted on charges including concealing a death, tampering with evidence, and hindering the apprehension of a criminal. He received a sentence of 25 years in prison for his role in covering up Tara's death. Additionally, Bo Dukes faced separate charges related to sexual assault, and in April 2019, he was convicted of raping a woman in Burke County, receiving another 25 years to be served consecutively. As Bo Dukes was led away in handcuffs, some measure of justice had been achieved. But the main event was still to come. Ryan Duke's trial began in May 2022, 17 years after Tara Grinstead disappeared. The prosecution painted a picture of a young man driven by desperation and addiction, a burglar who stumbled into a nightmare and made the choice to kill rather than face the consequences of being discovered. They presented the testimony of Bo Dukes, who claimed that Ryan had confessed to killing Tara and that the two of them had worked together to burn her body. But the defense offered a radically different narrative. Ryan Duke's attorneys argued that their client was a scapegoat, a vulnerable young man with mental health struggles who had been manipulated by the true killer, Bo Dukes. They pointed to inconsistencies in the evidence, questioned the reliability of witness testimony, and suggested that the real murderer had successfully shifted blame onto an easy target. The jury faced an impossible task. Two men, each accusing the other. No physical evidence directly linking either man to the actual killing. Only the word of witnesses with their own reasons to shade the truth. In the end, the jury reached a split decision. Ryan Duke was acquitted of malice murder and felony murder. The jurors did not believe, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the prosecution had proven Ryan Duke personally killed Tara Grinstead. However, he was convicted of concealing a death, a charge that acknowledged his role in hiding what had happened without definitively establishing that he was the killer. The reaction was explosive. Tara's family was devastated. After 17 years of waiting, after enduring the arrests and trials and endless speculation, they had hoped for a murder conviction. Instead, they were left with more questions than answers. If Ryan Duke didn't kill Tara, who did? If Bo Dukes was the real killer, why wasn't he charged with murder? Was justice truly served? Or had the system failed a woman who deserved so much better? The community of Ocilla was equally divided. Some believed that Ryan Duke had gotten away with murder through legal technicalities and a skilled defense. Others believed that the jury had correctly identified reasonable doubt, that perhaps the true killer had manipulated the situation from the beginning. The debate raged in living rooms and church parking lots, at family dinners and community gatherings. But here's the question I want you to think about. I want you to really sit with this for a moment. If you knew someone had done something terrible, something unforgivable, but they were someone you cared about, someone you'd known your whole life, would you turn them in? Or would you keep their secret? Think about that. Think about what you would actually do when loyalty and morality collide. Leave a comment below and tell me honestly what you think you'd do. Because this is exactly what happened in Ocilla for 11 years. People knew. Whispers circulated. But nobody stepped forward until it was almost too late. The aftermath of Ryan Duke's trial left a community fractured and a family searching for peace. But the story of Tara Grinstead wasn't over. It couldn't be over. Because despite everything, despite the arrests and trials and convictions, something was still missing. Accountability. True, complete, unambiguous accountability for the death of a woman who had given so much to so many. Ryan Duke was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the concealment conviction, with credit for time already served. It was a sentence that felt, to many, woefully inadequate for the role he played in hiding Tara's death for over a decade. He would be eligible for release, potentially, far sooner than anyone would have thought possible given the severity of the original charges. But the legal system wasn't finished with Ryan Duke. In a twist that surprised many observers, federal prosecutors stepped in where state prosecutors had encountered limitations. Ryan Duke was charged with federal offenses related to his conduct, adding additional layers of accountability to a case that had already made national headlines. The federal system, with its different standards and procedures, offered another chance to pursue justice for Tara. Meanwhile, the investigation into what really happened that night continued. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, despite the trials being concluded, kept the case file open. There were still questions that hadn't been answered. There were still witnesses who might come forward. There were still truths buried in the memories of people who had never found the courage to speak. And slowly, painfully, those truths began to emerge. In the years following the trials, additional witnesses came forward with information they had kept hidden for years. Some spoke of conversations overheard at parties, casual admissions made when guards were down, and alcohol loosened tongues. Others revealed that the secret of what happened to Tara Grinstead had been an open secret in certain circles, known to a small group of people who had chosen silence over justice. The picture that emerged was damning not just for Ryan Duke and Bo Dukes, but for the community itself. How many people had known, or suspected, what had happened to Tara? How many had chosen to protect their friends, their neighbors, their own comfortable lives, rather than speak up for a dead woman who could no longer speak for herself? This was the true horror of the Tara Grinstead case. Not just that she had been killed, but that her death had been covered up by a community conspiracy of silence. Not a formal conspiracy, perhaps, not a coordinated effort, but a collective decision made by individuals across Ocilla and beyond to look the other way, to pretend they didn't know, to convince themselves that it wasn't their business, wasn't their responsibility, wasn't their problem. For 11 years, that silence held. For 11 years, Tara's family grieved without answers. For 11 years, a killer walked free because the people who could have stopped him chose not to. But secrets always surface. And when they do, the reckoning is always more painful than it would have been if the truth had been told from the beginning. As more information came to light, the community of Ocilla was forced to confront uncomfortable questions about itself. What kind of culture had allowed this to happen? What values had been distorted so thoroughly that protecting a killer seemed more important than seeking justice for a victim? What lessons needed to be learned to ensure that nothing like this ever happened again? These were questions without easy answers, but asking them was a necessary first step toward healing. For Tara's family, the path forward was equally difficult. Anita Gaddis, who had spent over a decade fighting for her sister's memory, found herself processing a complicated mix of emotions. There was relief that arrests had been made, that some measure of accountability had been achieved. There was anger that the truth had taken so long to emerge, that so many people had known and said nothing. There was grief, always grief, for the sister she had lost and the justice that remained incomplete. But there was also determination. Tara's family refused to let her story end with disappointment and ambiguity. They committed themselves to honoring her memory through action, through advocacy, through ensuring that her death would not be in vain. The Tara Grinstead case became a catalyst for discussions about victim advocacy, about the importance of speaking up when you know something is wrong, about the community responsibility to pursue truth and justice even when it's uncomfortable. Tara's name became synonymous with the need for reform, for better support systems for victims' families, for holding not just criminals, but entire communities accountable when silence enables violence. Let me tell you about the man at the center of this tragedy in a way you haven't heard before. Because understanding Ryan Duke is crucial to understanding how something like this could happen. How a community could produce a killer and then protect him for over a decade. Ryan Duke was not born evil. He was not a monster from the beginning. He was a baby, then a child, then a teenager, shaped by the same forces that shape all of us. Family, community, circumstance, choice. Somewhere along the way, something went wrong. Perhaps many things went wrong. And by the time he was 18 years old, Ryan Duke was struggling with demons that he couldn't control. Addiction played a significant role in Ryan Duke's downfall. By his own admission, he was grappling with substance abuse issues in the months and years leading up to Tara's death. Drugs and alcohol had become crutches, ways of coping with pain and anxiety and the challenges of transitioning into adulthood. They clouded his judgment. They lowered his inhibitions. They made terrible choices seem like reasonable options. But addiction alone doesn't explain what happened. Millions of people struggle with substance abuse without ever committing violence. Something else was at work in Ryan Duke's psyche, something darker and more dangerous. Mental health advocates would later point to Ryan Duke's case as an example of what happens when young people don't get the help they need. The signs were there, they argued. The struggles were visible to those who knew what to look for. But in a community like Ocilla, where mental health was often stigmatized, where seeking help was sometimes seen as weakness, Ryan Duke's cries for help went unheard. This is not to excuse what he did. Nothing could excuse the taking of Tara Grinstead's life. But understanding the factors that contributed to the crime is essential if we want to prevent similar tragedies in the future. How many other young people in communities across America are struggling right now, spiraling toward violence because they don't have access to treatment, support, or intervention? And what about Bo Dukes? His story is equally troubling, in some ways even more so. Bo Dukes came from a family with resources and connections. He had opportunities that many young people in rural Georgia could only dream of. And yet, he made choices that revealed a fundamental disregard for human life and human dignity. When Ryan Duke allegedly came to him that night, in 2005, Bo Dukes had a choice. He could have called the police. He could have refused to participate. He could have been the voice of reason that prevented a tragedy from becoming a cover-up. Instead, he helped dispose of Tara's body. He burned her remains. He kept the secret for over a decade. And he went on to commit additional crimes, including sexual assault, that demonstrated a pattern of predatory behavior. What does it say about a community when it produces not one, but two young men capable of such actions? What does it say about the values we instill, the behaviors we tolerate, the warning signs we ignore? These are uncomfortable questions, but they are necessary questions. Because Ocilla is not unique. It is not an aberration. It is a reflection of dynamics that exist in communities across this country. The same forces that allowed Tara Grinstead's death to go unsolved for 11 years are present in towns and cities everywhere. The same silence that protected her killers is operating right now, shielding other perpetrators from justice. The Tara Grinstead case is a mirror, and what we see when we look into it should trouble us all. The years following the trials brought a slow but steady process of healing and reckoning. For the community of Ocilla, this meant confronting the ways in which they had failed Tara Grinstead. Town leaders organized community discussions about bystander responsibility, about the importance of speaking up when you witness wrongdoing, about the moral obligations that bind us to one another even when silence seems easier. Schools implemented new programs focused on character education and ethical decision-making. Churches preached sermons about the cost of complicity, about the difference between loyalty and enabling, about the moral courage required to stand up for what's right even when it means standing against people you know and love. And slowly, gradually, the culture began to shift. Young people in Ocilla grew up hearing Tara Grinstead's story, learning about the consequences of silence, understanding that they had a responsibility to their community that transcended personal relationships and social pressures. Her name became a touchstone, a reminder of what could happen when good people chose to do nothing in the face of evil. For Tara's family, healing was a more personal journey. Anita Gaddis, who had spent so many years fighting for answers, finally had the opportunity to begin processing her grief. Not moving on, not forgetting, never that, but finding a way to carry the loss that didn't consume every waking moment. She established a foundation in Tara's name, dedicated to supporting aspiring teachers and continuing the educational mission that had been so central to her sister's life. Scholarships were awarded to students who demonstrated the same commitment to service and community that Tara had embodied. Each recipient carried forward a piece of Tara's legacy, ensuring that her impact would continue for generations to come. The foundation also supported advocacy efforts for victims' families, providing resources and support for others navigating the impossible terrain of unsolved cases and inadequate justice. Anita became a speaker, a mentor, a voice for those whose voices had been silenced by violence and neglect. She transformed her pain into purpose, her grief into action. And in doing so, she ensured that Tara's death would ultimately mean something. That good would emerge from tragedy. That light would find a way through the darkness. Meanwhile, new information continued to emerge about the broader context of the case. Journalists and investigators dug deeper into the circumstances surrounding Tara's death, uncovering additional details about the culture of silence that had protected her killers for so long. These revelations were painful but necessary, forcing the community to confront truths they had long avoided. The podcast that had first reignited public interest in the case, Up and Vanished, continued to follow developments, keeping Tara's story in the public eye and ensuring that the lessons learned from her death would reach audiences far beyond rural Georgia. The case became a case study in true crime journalism, in the power of media to hold communities accountable and advance stalled investigations. But perhaps the most significant development came from an unexpected source. In the years following his conviction, Ryan Duke began a process that surprised many observers. From behind prison walls, he started cooperating more fully with investigators, providing additional details about what had happened that night in 2005 and expressing what appeared to be genuine remorse for his actions. Through his attorneys, Ryan Duke issued a formal apology to Tara Grinstead's family. He acknowledged his role in her death, whether direct or indirect, and took responsibility for the years of pain and uncertainty that had followed. He did not minimize what he had done. He did not make excuses. He simply expressed sorrow for a life cut short and a family destroyed. Whether this remorse was genuine or calculated, only Ryan Duke knows for certain. But for some members of Tara's family, his words provided a measure of closure that the trials had not. Not forgiveness, perhaps. That was too much to ask. But acknowledgement. Recognition. The simple admission that what had happened was wrong and that the person responsible understood the magnitude of his actions. Bo Dukes, by contrast, showed little sign of remorse. From his prison cell, where he was serving consecutive sentences for his various crimes, he maintained a defiant attitude, refusing to accept full responsibility for his role in the tragedy. His lack of contrition only reinforced the community's sense that he had been the more culpable of the two, the manipulator who had perhaps orchestrated more of the cover-up than had been proven in court. But justice, in the end, found Bo Dukes. The weight of his multiple convictions ensured that he would spend decades behind bars, that he would face consequences for his actions even if the specific nature of his involvement in Tara's death remained unclear. The system, imperfect as it was, had held him accountable. And for the first time in 17 years, Tara Grinstead's family could exhale. The victory was not complete. It was not the clear, unambiguous justice they had hoped for. But it was real. Both men responsible for hiding Tara's death were in prison. Both would face years, potentially decades, of punishment. Both had been exposed to the world for who they truly were. The silence that had protected them for so long had finally been shattered. And in its place, truth emerged. Painful, complicated, incomplete truth. But truth nonetheless. For the community of Ocilla, the resolution brought its own form of relief. The cloud that had hung over the town since 2005 began to lift. People could talk openly about what had happened, could process their grief and their guilt without the constant uncertainty that had plagued them for so long. They could look at their neighbors and know that the killers in their midst had been identified and punished. The town began to rebuild its sense of itself, not forgetting the tragedy, never that, but finding a way to move forward that honored Tara's memory while allowing the living to continue living. New businesses opened. Families grew. The rhythms of small-town life resumed, marked forever by what had happened but no longer defined by it. I started this story with a promise. I told you that what happened to Tara Grinstead would change the way you look at everyone around you. And I meant it. Because here's the truth that this case reveals, a truth that most of us would rather not face. The monsters we fear are rarely strangers lurking in shadows. They are people we know, people we trust, people who sat next to us in school, who shared our Thanksgiving tables, who played with our children in backyards on summer afternoons. Ryan Duke was not an outsider. He was a product of Ocilla, shaped by its schools and its churches and its values. Bo Dukes was not a drifter passing through town. He was connected, rooted, part of the fabric of the community. The people who kept their secret for 11 years were not criminals or conspirators. They were ordinary citizens who made the ordinary choice to prioritize comfort over courage. This is the uncomfortable truth that Tara Grinstead's death forces us to confront. Evil is not foreign. It is familiar. And our response to it, our willingness to speak up or stay silent, determines whether justice is served or denied. But this story does not end in darkness. It cannot, because Tara Grinstead lived a life of light, and that light cannot be extinguished by the circumstances of her death. Today, her legacy continues through the students she inspired who became teachers themselves, carrying forward her commitment to education and her belief in the potential of every young person. It continues through the scholarships awarded in her name, providing opportunities to dreamers who might otherwise have been overlooked. It continues through the advocacy work of her family, who transformed tragedy into a platform for change. It continues through you, watching this right now. Because by witnessing Tara's story, by allowing it to move you and challenge you and change you, you become part of her legacy. You carry a piece of her forward into a world that desperately needs the values she embodied. The community of Ocilla has learned painful lessons from this tragedy. They have confronted their failures and committed to doing better. They have established new norms of accountability, new expectations of moral courage, new standards for how neighbors should treat one another. Tara's family has found a way to honor her memory that transcends grief. They have created something beautiful from something terrible, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of love to overcome even the darkest circumstances. And Ryan Duke and Bo Dukes will spend years in prison, facing the consequences of their actions every single day. Justice, imperfect but real, has been served. This is not a story about death. It is a story about life. About the life Tara lived and the lives she touched. About the life of a community that faced its darkest moment and emerged stronger. About the life that continues in her name, through her legacy, because of her example. If there is one lesson to take from all of this, it is this: speak up. When you see something wrong, say something. When you know a truth that needs to be told, tell it. When silence would be complicity, choose courage instead. Because somewhere out there, right now, another Tara is in danger. Another family is waiting for answers. Another community is protecting secrets that need to be exposed. And your voice might be the one that makes the difference. Tara Grinstead walked into Irwin County High School every morning with a smile that could light up the darkest hallway. She believed in the potential of her students. She gave everything she had to a community that loved her. And in the end, that community found its way back to her. Through justice, through accountability, through the simple, powerful decision to finally tell the truth. Rest now, Tara. You are remembered. You are honored. You are loved. And your story will never be forgotten.